Reportedly, more than 100 people are trapped on the roof of a building in Hong Kong after a fire broke out. The blaze broke out at the World Trade Center, triggering a massive emergency response. Our news correspondent, Richard Kimber, has the details. Richard, are you still at the scene? What's the latest? What is happening?
That's right. So right behind me you can see ambulances, fire trucks, police vans all coalescing in this area. They've cordoned off all the streets around the building, which is just at the end of the street behind me there. Some 300 people were reported to still be trapped on the roof of the building some 20 minutes ago. I've since seen a few dozen be led to safety by fire crews down the street behind me. Fortunately, none of them requiring immediate ambulance assistance, but it's understood that 12 people are in hospital currently receiving treatment for the smoke inhalation that they've suffered since this fire broke out. Now, the building itself is a 40-story building right in the heart of Hong Kong's busy downtown district. It's got a mixture of office and restaurants inside, and many of the people in those spaces were suddenly taken by surprise when smoke started pouring into the rooms from beneath them. That's because the lower half of the building is currently undergoing a massive renovation project, and police say that the fire initially broke out in an electrical room lower down in the building, and the smoke began to spread up through the rest of the tower. Now, fire crews have been bringing huge extendable ladders to try and rescue people, not just from the roof, but also from a podium level on the 5th floor of the building where many people rushed to safety. So as we continue to stand here, we're seeing more people be evacuated. Police are using tannoys to warn the public not to gather in this area, just in case the situation escalates further. But as I say, fortunately, none of the people that I've seen be evacuated in the short time I've been standing in this position have required immediate ambulance assistance. So the hope is that the rest of the people can be led to safety fairly quickly, and then fire crews can go in and assess the real infrastructural damage of the building.
Richard, just some clarification. You're saying the fire started in an electrical room, but other reports are saying that the fire started on the 39th floor in a dining place. What's the actual story there?
Well, obviously mixed messages coming out in these early stages, but certainly the initial police comment was that this electrical room lower down in the building seemed to be the source of the fire. But the reason for the confusion might be because of this renovation work requiring huge scaffolding to be wrapped around the outside of the building, and that's why it's been unclear to some, particularly those who've been standing here as I have, exactly where the origin of the fire could be, because there's been pockets of smoke coming out from different levels of the building. But the biggest challenge at the moment for the rescue teams is, as you say, because there's the danger even higher up on the building at the 39th floor. That's why many of the people in the higher floors have ended up having to go to the roof. And as I say, for a 40-story building, that makes it somewhat more difficult for fire crews to try and evacuate, because it's not straightforward for them to go in the bottom and climb to the top, hence the use of these extremely long ladders which have been trying to ferry people to safety. And that's why the rescue operation at the moment is taking slightly longer than it would have done if all those people had been lower down to start with.
Richard, World Trade Centers are usually a hub of activity, especially a place like Hong Kong, where business comes in from all over the world. How will this impact business operations? And just tell us about the Hong Kong World Trade Center, its significance in the world economic space.
Well, it's certainly an iconic building. It was built in 1975 and at the time was one of the standout office buildings in this district, but it's since been surpassed by many other taller buildings around it, and actually it's undergone significant renovations in the last 20 years, one of which it's currently undergoing now. And this somewhat calls into question how a lot of these older huge office towers in Hong Kong can keep up with many of the modern demands that are placed on them as they constantly get renovated to be used for new industrial space or office space. And so it is bringing into question how a city like Hong Kong, with such a huge range of infrastructure from the very, very old to the brand new, can continue to find common ground with regards to how its safety operations are managed. There have been calls in the past for many of the older districts of Hong Kong to undergo radical reformation in order to make sure that they keep up with modern safety standards. This building doesn't really fall into that category, but certainly with so much building work taking place in what is inherently an incredibly densely populated area, it causes so many problems for property developers and redevelopers in cities like this, and that's one of the concerns for how to carry out efficient rescue operations in cases like this one.
concerns? You're saying that they're under construction. Are there concerns for the structure of the building?
There's no sense at the moment that the actual fundamental structure of the building is at risk. Police have cordoned off, as I say, many streets around the building, but even where I'm standing now I would think, be a little bit too close if there were serious concerns over the infrastructure. I'm basically one street away. Earlier on there were suggestions that many blocks more might be cordoned off, but at the moment this is the level that police and fire crews deem to be safe. So that does leave some hope that the overall infrastructure of the building should be fine. But the key thing at the moment, as I say, is get those people off the roof, and then fire crews are planning to go in and assess whether or not there needs to be some longer term restructuring of the building at all. But in an area like this where there's just so many high-rise buildings, you can see them right behind me on all sides, it does pose continued challenges for rescue operations and for infrastructure development in a city like this one.
Richard, as it happens in a World Trade Center, there are people from all over the world. Have we gotten any information yet as to the nationalities of people affected?
Not at the moment. The only confirmed case of somebody who's in a more serious condition in hospital is that of a local woman in her 60s who's said to be in a semi-conscious condition because of the smoke inhalation that she suffered. The other people in hospital are said to be in a less serious condition. Now this building, it does have many offices in it, as we've mentioned earlier, but they're not necessarily the same types of central financial offices of major international banks, for example, that would be in a district maybe 4 or 5 blocks away from this one. It's a slightly older part of town, so we're looking more at some older office buildings in this area, hence the probably less likely to be a big international spread of people affected by this, knowing as I do some of the restaurants and some of the offices that exist in this area. But at the moment no indication of nationalities and so on, but just these 12 people said to be in hospital at the moment suffering smoke inhalation. But fortunately, as I mentioned at the beginning, none of the people I've seen be escorted out of the building since then have been rushed into ambulances, as some of them were during the initial phase of this rescue phase.
Richard, just a quick one before we let you go. You're in Hong Kong, and a lot has been said about that part of the world in terms of the global fight against COVID-19. What's the latest in this regard?
Yes, it's certainly been a hectic few months here. Right now we're looking at the government trying to reopen the city with the border with the mainland of China. Now this has been a long drawn out process that's taken many months to try and win approval from Beijing, who's been requiring Hong Kong to keep basically 0 cases of COVID-19 every day. There was a point at the beginning of December and just at the end of November when it looked like that would all go ahead, but of course that's been derailed somewhat by the Omicron variant, and reports now that there are cases being discovered in southern China, in Guangdong, which is the province directly across the border from Hong Kong, and the province into which most of the Hong Kongers who are hoping to cross the border would have been going for business or to visit family. So that is potentially putting that opening at risk. But there's so much pressure here from the business community to reopen the border quickly, because it's been many, many months now in Hong Kong where it's been very difficult to travel for anybody in the business world here, and it's really undermining the city's status as an international finance hub when there are other cities globally, whether it's Singapore nearby to here or London or New York, that have reopened months ago effectively and are making it much easier for that process to continue. So the government's under continued pressure now to try and push through these openings up, while of course still trying to maintain public safety.
Thank you so much for updating us on the Hong Kong World Trade Center fire.